Hi, here I am. I just opened up After Effects, a new project in After Effects. I didn't get that on the screen record, but I think you got it. One thing that I wanted to point out was that you can open up an After Effects project, but a project is composed of several compositions, kind of like scenes in a movie. The movies like the project and the compositions are like the scenes. So I have my project open, but I need to put a new composition in there. I could open another project by going File, New Project, but to add a composition, I need in my menu bar to go to Composition, New Composition. In class, I talked about opening up a composition using the NTSC DV. So that's kind of like TV, old-fashioned TV standards. The width in pixels and heights is something that would fit in older TV sets. We have lots of options now because, of course, we can see movies on all kinds of devices. I think I'm just going to stick with NTSC DV for the heck of it. It's a smaller, manageable size file, and my laptop is sort of running out of space, and a bigger file would be harder for me to manage. When I open this up, I get a frame rate of 29.97. I get a starting time code of all zeros, and then I get a preset duration, right? So this is not like in Premiere, where Premiere you put a clip in there, and as long as your clip is, the Premiere timeline will accept it. In After Effects, you need to say ahead of time how long you want your file to be. I'm just going to go ahead and do a straight 1 minute file, which is fine and dandy for our purposes. Again, this is hour, this is minutes, this is seconds, and this is frames. There are 29.97 frames per second in this composition. And then I can choose whatever background color I might like to have. I'm going to go ahead and choose gray. I'll hit OK. And I'll give this composition a name, and I'll call it Start Day 1 After Effects. And then I'll hit OK. Awesome. My black background comes up. You'll notice in class this is exactly what didn't come up before. And then what I'd like to do is I would like to create, wait, back up. Let me show you around a little bit. This is my composition window. This displays whatever content I have on my timeline. Right now, I don't have any content on my timeline, so we're just seeing the background color. Over here in the project window, I have my composition that I just created, but not much else. So what I wanted to do was create my own content in my After Effects file, and I can actually draw using some of the preset tools that I can find up here in this top menu bar. The menu bar has a bunch of other, it has a move tool, it has a hand tool which allows me to shuffle around in my composition, it has a zoom tool, rotation tool, some other very specific tools, pen tool, text tool. Under the rectangle tool, I'm going to hold down with my mouse and get my star tool out, and I'm going to draw a star. It's off the screen, so I'm going to go back and get my arrow tool and pull that star right into my composition. One thing we notice is that I have a fill, and the fill has a red line through it, and I clicked on the word fill, and I don't want to not have a fill. I can have two different kinds of gradient or solid. That's what I want. I want a solid color in my fill. Opacity 100%, no blend mode on it, just a good old-fashioned solid color. I'll hit OK. And now I have a fill, a red fill, and a hot pink stroke. In this case, I actually don't want a stroke. I just want one fill color. So I'm going to click on that, which is a square with a red arrow through it, which is in computer application language means none, no stroke. Perfect. You know what? I don't like this fill color. I need something more yellow because hello star, that's the language I'm expecting. To stop and reset because I wanted to show you that when I made that shape layer, there are some controls that I have access to, but only if I go to this arrow that's pointing towards the shape layer. I need to click on that and twirl it down to get a contents and transform. And the thing I'm most interested in is transform here. By the way, I'm going to give myself a little bit of work room. I'm going to use my cursor to roll over to the divide in between the composition window and the timeline, and I'm going to click and drag down because I need less timeline and more composition window. Okay, yeah, so I have my star. I clicked on the arrow and I clicked on the arrow for transform. And what I'd like to do now is I would like to experiment with some of these transform tools. I think starting with rotation. The deal is that when I want to apply a transformation to an object on my composition stage, I would like to have it animate. So not just a transformation, but something that modifies itself over time. What I'm going to do is under shape layer, under transform, I have rotation, and next to rotation is a little stopwatch. I'm going to click on that stopwatch, and what I see is a little keyframe that appears wherever my playback controller was. Now I only needed to turn that stopwatch on once because now I can apply a transformation to my star and After Effects will automatically generate a new keyframe. I'm going to use these the numbers here. This is 89 degrees, which is what the star is already rotated to. Let me put 100 degrees and I'll hit return on my keyboard. And what happens is a new keyframe is created. I can jump back and forth between these two keyframes if I go out past the rotation. Here's my keyframe, and here are these arrows pointing forwards and backwards, and I can jump between the two keyframes that I've made. Now I'm going to go out on my timeline, and I would like to rotate my star more. Now I just entered 100 in there by clicking on it once and then typing 100. Now I can do 120, and I'll hit return, which will rotate it more. But I'm going to go out with my playback controller even further. And the nice thing about After Effects is that it has a scrubber. Do you see how my cursor changes to a finger over two arrows? So I can just click and drag, and it'll automatically change that numerical amount. And here we go out here. Great. That's my rotation. I'm going to take my playback controller to the beginning, and I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to see, wow, so there I have a nice, lovely, slow rotation. Just a heads up, this rotation occurs over 5 seconds. I'm kind of zoomed out on my timeline. It might be nicer to scooch into my timeline a little more. Now when I hit my playback controller, I can see that spiraling, but maybe I don't want it to go as slowly. The main thing about keyframes is the farther they are apart, the slower the transformation will be. The closer they are together, the quicker. So I'm going to take my second keyframe, and I can actually just click and drag it closer to the first keyframe. And when I hit play my spacebar for playback, we can see that all of a sudden my animation has picked up some. There's not as much time elapsing between the keyframes, hence my rotation is quicker. Take my playback controller, let's do it again. In fact, I can have a modulated animation, maybe slow, fast. I can grab two keyframes at once by highlighting over them. And then we get some interesting effects here. Great. There we go. There's a nice rotation. In addition to rotation, I'm going to modify my star by using the scale. So right now the star is exactly the same size as when I drew it. But what if I click the stopwatch next to scale? It gives me a keyframe here. And then I'll take my playback controller out into the timeline and I'll make my star smaller. And then I'll take my playback controller out further and I'll make my star even bigger. So I have two things going on. I'm about to hit my spacebar and you can see some animation happening. I'm using scale and rotation at the same time. One last thing that I wanted to show you, which just follows up from what we were lecturing or talking about in class the other day, is I can also change the position of the star so it can move from one part of the screen to another. I'm going to go ahead and click on my stopwatch, which gave me a keyframe. I'm going to go out kind of in the middle of my animation so far, and I'm going to change the position of my star by just clicking and dragging on it in my timeline. So now I can jump back and forth between my starting position and my ending position here. And we notice a couple things. We notice that the star moves, which is great and just what I wanted. But we also get this beaded bar. This beaded bar will not show up in your final animation, but it is a Bezier curve that dictates the movement of your object as it changes position. So what I've done, because it's a Bezier curve, it has handlebars, just like we learned in any kind of Illustrator project. And because it has handlebars, I can change the track that the object goes down. So instead of being a straight line, now when I hit my spacebar, we see our star curving along the Bezier curve to a new position. So this is what we covered in class. One last thing, if you experimented with what you were doing and you were really happy with it and wanted to take this with you, you could go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Now the story in After Effects is often you will want to render multiple compositions, and render time usually takes quite a bit. So what After Effects does is it allows you to make all the changes you want in your various compositions. Then you can stack them one after another in your render queue and then render them all at once overnight, right? Sometimes it can take 35 hours to get a really heavily processed clip out. Here's my render queue. It popped up as a little tab at the bottom of my screen. I'm going to leave all the settings alone for the moment. The most important thing is this output to. It's going to want to know where you want your file to be saved. Now After Effects, you actually click on the text and you can decide where you want your file to go. I'll just hit save, and it doesn't do anything until I hit render, and then it takes that animation and exports it out. I could walk away at this moment and then come back in the morning and have my movie made. I can watch its progress as it goes along here. But that's just for those of you who, let's say you really end up loving the animation that you make and you wanted to experiment with it.